Audiobook Academy Biography presents Joseph Priestley. Joseph Priestley, an English clergyman, political theorist, and physicist, was born on March 13, 1733, in Burstall Fieldhead, near Leeds, Yorkshire, now West Yorkshire, England, and died on February 6, 1804, in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, USA. He is most known for his work in the field of gas chemistry. Early life and career. Priestley was born in the Calvinist stronghold of West Riding, Yorkshire, to a family of modestly successful wool cloth makers. In 1752, he enrolled in Daventry's Dissenting Academy. The Act of Uniformity, 1662, barred dissenters from joining English universities because they refused to adhere to the Church of England's teachings. During his time at Daventry, Priestley developed into a furious freethinker when it came to religion despite his superb training in philosophy, physics, languages, and literature. A rational Unitarianism, he rejected the Trinity, affirmed the perfectibility of man, and repudiated the Calvinist doctrines of original sin and atonement he had previously held. Priestley served as a clergyman in Needham Market, Suffolk, and Nantwich, Cheshire, between 1755 and 1761. The Warrington Academy, in Lancashire, hired him as a tutor in 1761 for languages and literature. In 1762, he was ordained a preacher of the dissenting faith. The following year, he wed Mary Wilkinson, the daughter of Isaac Wilkinson, an ironworker. 1 girl and 3 sons were the result of their union. Electricity. In 1765, Priestley met Benjamin Franklin, an American scientist and politician, who inspired him to publish The History and Present State of Electricity, with original experiments, 1767. According to Priestley's argument, advancement in science is more dependent on the collection of new facts that anybody can uncover than on the theoretical ideas of a select few individuals. Facts over hypotheses was consistent with Priestley's belief that bias and dogma of any kind impeded independent investigation and private judgment. His electrical investigations were shaped by this understanding of scientific process, in which he predicted the inverse square rule of electrical attraction and discovered that charcoal conducts electricity. These experiments led to his election as a Fellow of the Royal Society of London in 1766. When he started looking into this topic, he was encouraged to go into a bigger field of creative experimentation in other fields. Gas chemistry. At Mill Hill Chapel, Leeds, Priestley resumed his chemistry experiments after returning to the pulpit in 1767. His investigations with gases, or airs, as they were then termed, were documented in 6 volumes of experiments and observations on different kinds of air and more than a dozen articles in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society between 1772 and 1790. Air, carbon dioxide, fixed air, and hydrogen were all previously identified as 3 distinct gases by British pneumatic chemists. Inflammable air. In his phlogiston theory, Priestley proposed that combustible things release phlogiston, an immaterial principle of inflammability, as a byproduct of combustion. Aside from the nitrous oxide, Priestley discovered the following new gases: ammonia, hydrogen chloride, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, silicon tetrafluoride, fluoracid air, nitrogen, phlogisticated air, oxygen, and the gas later identified as carbon monoxide. Priestley's discoveries were made independently by Carl Wilhelm Scheele. It was Priestley's inventive instruments and ability to use them that made his experiments successful. He became famous for his improved pneumatic trough in which he was able to isolate and analyze gases that were soluble in water by collecting them over mercury instead of water. In 1773, Priestley received the Royal Society's Copley Medal for his work on gases. While in Caen, Priestley worked as a librarian and tutor for the family of William Petty, Earl of Shelburne. To further bolster his newfound conviction in a compassionate God, he went to this location and found additional evidence. Priestley's vision of nature's restoration of the common air, which had been vitiated and depleted by such noxious processes as combustion and respiration, was sparked by his observations of vegetation and the agitation of oceans and lakes. Additionally, his observations influenced those of his contemporaries, such as Dutch physician Jan Ingenhousz and Swiss clergyman and scientist Jean Senebier, who conducted photosynthetic experiments. English dissenters, according to Priestley, would benefit financially from his scientific endeavors. A 17th-century philosopher and statesman, Francis Bacon, argued in favor of a science-based trade for the advancement of society. The Lunar Society, a group of prominent Birmingham gentlemen, dissenters, and industrialists, including Josiah Wedgwood, Erasmus Darwin, James Watt, and Matthew Boulton, who used scientific and technological principles to address the challenges of 18th-century urban life. confirmed this view when he moved to Birmingham in 1780 to become a preacher at the New Meeting House and join the Lunar Society. Priestley devised an instrument that created carbonated water, a mixture that he hoped would be beneficial to those suffering from scurvy and other fevers in towns and military sites at the time. While the gasogene that used this technology failed to treat these illnesses, it was later used to create the soda water industry. The eudiometer, created by Priestley, was widely employed in the sanitary reform and urban planning movements to gauge the purity, or oxygen concentration, of the air. Thomas Beddoes, a physician and chemist, founded Bristol's Pneumatic Institution in 1798 to study the effects of various airs on a number of common maladies, but the institution was only around for a brief time. Joseph Priestley's oxygen discovery and subsequent chemical revolution. The discovery that Priestley made on August 1, 1774, when he heated red mercuric oxide to produce a colorless gas, established his long-lasting scientific renown. Dephlogisticated air was the name he gave the gas after discovering that a candle could burn and a mouse could live in it, proving his theory that regular air became saturated with phlogiston when it could no longer support combustion or life. The fact that Priestley had discovered a all-new species of air was still up for debate. Antoine Lavoisier, the French scientist, was in Paris in October of that year when he met with his benefactor, Shelburne, and explained to him how he had discovered the new air. Chemistry will never be the same after these two experts meet. It was Lavoisier who immediately replicated Priestley's experiments and spent the years 1775 to 1780 conducting in-depth research from which he derived the elemental nature of oxygen, recognized it as the active atmospheric principle, interpreted its role in combustion and respiration, and even named it after him. Lavoisier's statements about the activity of oxygen changed chemistry. The phlogiston idea was upheld by Priestley notwithstanding Lavoisier's disapproval of it. He was more convinced than ever that the French establishment of religious dogma and political dogma was pushing its beliefs on the scientific community, and therefore his dissenter leanings intensified his hostility to Lavoisier's new system of chemistry. He produced a short booklet in 1800, Doctrine of Phlogiston Established, and that of the Composition of Water Refuted, which he extended into a full-length book in 1803. The oxygen theory's empirical, theoretical, and methodological flaws were extensively discussed in the Doctrine of Phlogiston. A slow, humble, and exploratory attitude to God's limitless creation was advocated by Priestley. Observation of God's good creation is the only way chemistry can promote religious faith and freedom. Lavoisier's oxidation theory of combustion and respiration replaced the phlogiston idea. Politics, education, and theology. Priestley's rational Christianity placed a high value on science. Gloomy Calvinist teachings of the intrinsic depravity of man and the inscrutable will of a vindictive God were repudiated by him in Institutes of Natural and Revealed Religion, 1772-74. David Hartley's doctrine of association of thoughts was utilized by Priestley to buttress his belief that man's perfectibility was inevitable because of a developing knowledge of his role in a deterministic system of benevolence. Materialism, determinism, and Socinianism, Unitarianism, are all consistent with a reasonable understanding of the Bible, according to Priestley in An History of the Corruptions of Christianity, 1782. Jesus Christ, he claimed, was only a man who spoke of the resurrection of the body rather than the immortality of a non-existent soul. The University of Edinburgh awarded him an LL.D. in 1765 for his educational and literary achievements at Warrington. A Course of Liberal Education for Civil and Active Life, 1765, an essay on a course of liberal education for civil and active life, 1762, and lectures on history and general policy, prepared at Warrington but not published until 1788. In addition to his views on language, history, and education, Priestley relied on the notion of association of ideas. When it came to correct usage of language in general, in particular, he used common sense to guide his decisions. In addition, he used teaching methods based on the personal experiences of his students in order to better prepare his students for the real world. In his work in politics, Priestley brought together theory and practice. As part of the dissenters' nationwide fight against the Test and Corporation Act, 1661, he became active in 1767. For him, free speech, worship, and education were essential to scientific advancement and human perfection. Laissez-faire economics was founded by Scottish philosopher Adam Smith. Priestley advocated limiting the role of government and evaluating its efficiency only in terms of private well-being. The expression "the greatest happiness of the greatest number" was coined by utilitarian economist Jeremy Bentham after reading Priestley's famous work, Exile and Commotion. Priestley's support for the American and French revolutions, along with that of his friend, the moral philosopher Richard Price, was deemed seditious by the English press and government. In 1791, Priestley's home and laboratory were demolished by the Church and King mob, which was led by Benjamin Franklin. Price's congregation in Hackney, just outside of London, became a safe haven for Priestley and his family. Furthering his anti-British government stance in letters to the Right Honourable Edmund Burke, Priestley later became a professor at Oxford's New College, 1791. Priestley's advocacy of the French Revolution fell on deaf ears as the conservative backlash in England grew stronger. It was during this time that he fled to the United States of America and found reasonably bearable forms of government. This work, which he is best known for in the United States, was part of the Republican counter-response against the Federalists. Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, lamented and revered Priestley's death in Northumberland, Pennsylvania. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.